Alright guys, so let's talk about Davos today. You know, our favorite collection of globalists. Now during the summit, Trump, he just ran wild. He basically hammered everyone there. He laughed at Canada again and threatened tariffs at them. He scolded Bank of America and basically tore Wall Street a new one. This shouldn't be a surprise because this season of The Apprentice, Trump's best friends are the oil industry and big tech giants. He simply swapped Jamie Dimon for Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. But I want to talk about the most disturbing demand Trump has. He now wants to control the global oil markets with threats and demand. Now, Donald Trump is telling Saudi Arabia and OPEC to crash the global price of oil. In addition, Trump also wants central banks around the world to lower interest rates immediately afterwards. No, I'm not kidding, he really did say this. If you want to talk about a global hegemon throwing its weight around, this is it. Now, we know during the Biden administration, it was done behind the scenes, but at least Trump is upfront about it. What you see is what you get.
Saudi Arabia will be investing at least $600 billion in America, but I'll be asking the Crown Prince, who's a fantastic guy, to round it out to around $1 trillion. I think they'll do that because we've been very good to them. And I'm also going to ask Saudi Arabia and OPEC to bring down the cost of oil. You got to bring it down, which frankly, I'm surprised they didn't do before the election. That didn't show a lot of love by them not doing it. I was a little surprised by that. If the price came down, the Russia-Ukraine war would end immediately. Right now, the price is high enough that war will continue. You got to bring down the oil price. You got to end that war.
So you heard it. Trump wants Saudi Arabia to invest $1 trillion into the United States, basically to fund his AI plan of world domination, and we'll touch on that another time. However, we have to talk about the US telling the Middle East to lower the price of oil. The reason, as you just heard, was to end the war in Ukraine. Trump basically wants to crash crude prices to bring down Russian revenues, so deprive Putin's war chest of funding, and it's the same playbook all over again. He's also trying to get China to force the Russians to sign a peace plan. Obviously, this would be on America's terms, but as we all know, this just won't work. China isn't going to abandon Russia because they will be next in line for all the economic sanctions. And if you're getting cheap Russian crude, why give that up as well? It's important we look at Russia's economic situation. We keep hearing that the economy is overheating, rates are too high, and Moscow will collapse tomorrow. But is that really the case here? Despite the commodity and banking sanctions, Russia isn't crashing just yet. In fact, their revenues are flying up. December's revenue hit over 4 trillion rubles or $40 billion. That's 28% higher than the year before. Earnings from oil and gas, they have stayed stable for the last 10 years. In fact, it's non-oil and gas revenue that's flying up. This shows that the Russian economy is becoming less and less dependent on only their energy sector. Sanctions aren't effective, and if they magically work, it won't stop the war machine. So is Trump's motivation really about Russia? What is the real reason behind telling MBS to crash oil prices? Maybe it has something more to do with the US economy itself. Trump wants to embark on a dangerous tariff war with the world. He wants to punish not just China, but the G7, Europe, and Asia. Basically, every country in the world is on the menu. Inflation in the US is starting to rebound. CPI has gone from 2.7% to 2.9% in December. The cost of living crisis is getting worse. Why do you think Trump wants energy prices to come down? Trump also wants global central banks to lower rates. It's simple why. If they all lower rates, there will be less competition for money. The Federal Reserve can then lower their own rates to take pressure off the US economy in tandem. But by far the biggest threat is how countries could retaliate against America's trade war. Not everyone is going to take this line down. It will be mutually assured financial destruction.
Of course, if the president does choose to proceed with tariffs on Canada, Canada will respond. And everything is on the table. We are prepared for every possible scenario.
And if Canada dares to say that, you can be sure other countries, especially China, would retaliate as well. They would raise their own trade barriers on US goods coming in. In addition, suppliers of critical minerals might impose export restrictions. So now US industries would be on the defensive. As input costs go up, production costs also gets more expensive. So US consumers have to pay more for American goods. US exporters will also have to lower prices to sell overseas. And these are the effects on the US economy. As a result of the trade war, US GDP could fall by 1.3% this year. That overshadows economic growth from Trump's tax cuts. As a result, inflation would also get worse. Both the tariff war and the tax plan could push CPI up by 0.7% in total. Trying to reshore production will be a big gamble for Trump. His economic plan will be carried out under fire. He'll be operating in a world where countries, they're all going to be wary of the US. Many nations, especially BRICS, are de-dollarizing and they're already trading amongst themselves outside of the USD. But let's focus a bit on Saudi Arabia. Does MBS have any reason at all to comply with Trump's demands? Will he force Saudi Aramco or OPEC for that matter to sell oil at a discount? Between Trump and Saudi Arabia, the kingdom has the advantage, especially when it comes to pricing power. Despite rising inflation, Saudi Arabia still has the world's lowest production cost for oil at just $10 a barrel. The price of crude is around $80 today, so the profit margin is huge. The kingdom is raking in a ton of money. So yes, MBS can indeed sell his oil at a discount if he wants to. If the Saudis raises production substantially and floods the world with exports, prices will come down. But here's the quandary. Why would Saudi Arabia do that? Firstly, MBS is dealing with a big budget deficit. He's trying to raise investment money, and that's around 3% of GDP. So he has to optimize both the volume and selling price of the exports. Sure, crushing oil would benefit Trump's administration. Inflation would drop, but we have to consider who has the biggest economic footprint in the Middle East, and that's China. Beijing has the deepest trading relations with the entire OPEC nations. In contrast, the US is almost non-existent there. The majority of Saudi imports comes from China. Beijing is also the biggest buyer of Saudi oil exports. And with China boosting domestic consumption, MBS, he doesn't want to jeopardize this relationship. Rising Chinese demand would mean higher oil prices and more revenue for the kingdom anyway. There isn't a real need to listen to the US. However, the US economy is getting desperate. Trump wants to bring energy costs down by half, energy bills to drop by 50% in the next 12 months. That is his pledge and part of the reshoring plan. To make US manufacturing affordable to attract a ton of companies to make stuff in America.
America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. We will be a rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it.
Now I hope you can see the inconsistencies here. If the US has the largest amount of oil and gas in the world, why not pumping out yourself? Why not export it out instead of getting the Saudis to do the work? Because Trump wants maximum profits for US oil companies. The Saudis can dump more barrels on the cheap while the US can withhold production, or they could sell to Europe at higher prices. There's also another factor we must consider. The cost of drilling for oil in the US is extremely expensive. The break-even cost for most US projects is between $59 to $70. The Permian Basin, which is the largest oil-producing field in the US, averages around 65. So there's a limit to how much the price of oil can drop. If it falls too much, US oil wells could instantly turn unprofitable. Trump wants Saudi Arabia to do his dirty work and squeeze their own margins for the US. He also wants to refill the strategic reserves as prices goes down. I would be very surprised if OPEC or the Saudis listens to Trump wholesale. Beyond just lowering inflation, the US also wants to use oil to influence geopolitics. Now the end goal is to maximize profits and increase US economic dependency.
I would view that as we can raise U.S. production, we would squeeze down the bad actors, especially Iran. I believe Iran was down to 100,000 barrels of oil exports when President Trump left office. I believe that they are now exporting in excess or approximately 1.7 million. So through sanctions policy, I believe that we can, again, as I like to say, make Iran poor again. Not the Iranian people, the Iranian government. And then at the same time, they have our domestic producers push that up with the highest energy standards in the world.
So understand the plan here. The US wants Iran's production to collapse through sanctions and then replace Iranian supply with their own. That will protect profit margins and get more countries to buy from US producers. And when you buy oil from Trump, what currency are you going to use? Obviously, the US will demand that you pay in dollars. So this move also protects the petrodollar system as a side effect. Now, there are multiple layers to Trump's agenda, but it's quite simple to sum everything up. Washington wants to benefit from the expense of others without doing the dirty work themselves. Whoever controls energy production controls global politics. Even though we are moving towards renewable energy, the demand for oil and gas will only grow. We'll be going from 100 million barrels a day in 2025 to nearly 120 million by 2045. Across all categories, including diesel, gasoline, and jet fuel, demand is only going to go up. The biggest consumer is still going to be China, so global demand is controlled by the Chinese economy. Trump wants to control supply to gain more leverage on China and the world. And as we said earlier, it's also a measure to protect the dollar as the reserve currency. Trump's energy policy is really a bipolar one. If you think about it, he wants the best of both worlds. He needs the price of oil to be high enough, well above $60, so US producers can go out there and drill baby drill. But at the same time, he wants energy prices to fall by half. However, he doesn't believe in renewable energy. He doesn't want solar and wind, which is weird because their cost of generating power is dropping fast. While the cost of oil production will only continue to get more and more expensive, so there's an incredible disconnect between reality and Trump's fantasy. What you really need is all energy sources to bring the price of energy down. Biden, he had a problem with oil and gas, and now Trump has a problem with solar. This is the state of energy policy today in the United States. There's always a big gap here, something is missing. Now, I don't believe Saudi Arabia will play ball. If the US wants lower energy prices, they will have to pump out their own oil instead. But let me know what you think. What does Trump really want? And will Saudi Arabia follow US orders? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.